Here's how to pick music for a wedding. My name is Mircea Gogoncha. I'm a doctor of musical arts here in Southern California, and I should know, I have 113 music awards, I've played more than 500 concerts on 5 continents, I have 6 university degrees in music performance, and I've also done lots of weddings. So, first off, you'll have to think about the moments for which you would like music. There's 3 principal options here, and some people do more than that, but 3 main options you'll have to think of. The prelude, the processional, and the recessional. The prelude is the music that is heard while your guests are sitting down. That is before the actual ceremony begins, between the time when the first guest arrives and the last guest is seated and ready for the ceremony to start. This is more of a background music type situation, but the other ones are not. The processional is basically the music that is heard when the bridal party and the groom's party are walking in down the aisle, through the venue, and onto the stage. And then the recessional is what happens at the very end. So those are your 3 categories of music. Some people choose to have music for all 3. Some people choose to only do 1 or 2 of those. It's totally up to you. The next thing to talk about is what kind of music to choose for each one of those moments. Now, I'm not here to tell you what kind of music you should like. You should pick songs that you love and that you and your spouse have a special connection to. That's all well and good, but I can advise you on the type of music that works best in those 3 scenarios. First off, when it comes to the prelude, typically you want to leave this up to the musician unless you have very specific things in mind, but most likely the prelude is by far the longest moment. It can be, the shortest prelude I've ever played is maybe 10 minutes, and the longest could easily be half an hour or more. So generally you don't want to dictate every single song in here. Of course you can if you'd like to, but it's kind of a hassle to pick that much music. It's relatively easy if you just give the musician some general pointers about the genres and styles that you like, and if you're working with somebody professional, then they will pick some good options for you. That is not the case for the processional and recessional, where typically you want to have full control over every song that is heard. Now, let me talk about the processional first, because this is a very common misconception. Some people like to only have 1 song for the entire arrival of both parties, groom and bride, and their families. Other people have a specific song for the bride and another song for the rest of the party. And some people like really specific songs for each individual member of the bridal party. Each one of those works just as well from my point of view, but people seriously overestimate, in my opinion, the amount of time that it takes for each member of the party to walk down the aisle. Most people do some sort of rehearsal beforehand, and they time their rehearsal, and they think that the time that it takes for people to walk over in the rehearsal is going to be the same time as in the performance, in the actual wedding. That is decidedly not the case. The maximum amount of time that one pair will take to walk from the beginning all the way through the end is about 25 seconds, and it's typically shorter than that. If you have a really large venue, it's possible that it may be longer, but typically, if you have, let's say, 10 people in your bridal party, you should expect the entire processional to not really take more than 3 minutes. And so if you're gonna give the musician individual songs for each group, you have to keep in mind that you'll only be able to hear the beginning of these songs, right? It does work. This is something that I've done previously, and that works. It can work very well, but you should not expect that you'll be able to hear most of the music in that set. The other thing you have to keep in mind is the transition time between the different songs. Even if the musicians are extremely familiar with the music that they're playing, they're most likely going to be using sheet music for, 10 songs. And the time that it takes to figure out that a member of the bridal party has arrived, to stop in a natural way, to change sheet music, to start the next thing is at least 10 seconds, sometimes a little bit more. Now, one way to fix this is to group bridal party and groom's party members into a single song. So let's say you have 10 pairs arriving, right? Maybe the first 3 have 1 song, the next 3 have another song, the last 4 have 1 song, or something like that. That works much more smoothly in my experience. There's another detail to keep in mind, which is that all the members of the bridal party, of the groom's party, etc., but we, the hired musicians, do not. So even if you give a musician a very detailed list of who is coming and who each song belongs to, which by the way you should do. You should give us that sort of detailed play-by-play, because otherwise we're not going to know what to do. But even if we have that, and you say that Patty and John are going to be walking in, I don't know what Patty and John look like. And so I strongly recommend that you have a dedicated team member on the event organizer side whose only job during that processional is to signal to the artist when to change songs. That person should be strategically placed, positioned in a place where the musicians can see them, but they can also see what's going on with the bridal party, because that's another thing that you have to pay attention to. If I'm facing the audience and not the stage, then I don't know when they've finished walking. And if I'm facing the stage and not the audience, and I don't know when they start walking, it is impossible for us, the musicians, to look in both directions at the same time while also concentrating on playing. So you need somebody there if you're going to do any sort of complex processional whose job is exclusively to cue us in for every single one of those songs. In and out, by the way. Finally, let's talk about the recessional. There's only two things here that I would like to point out to you. First off, you should have communicated with the musician in advance what their cue should be for starting the recessional music. Because it has happened to me in the past that I started either too early or too late because it wasn't clear to me that the ceremony was or was not already over. So the officiant should have a chance to discuss with the musician and to tell them, hey, when I say you can kiss the bride, that's when you play, or when I say Mr. and Mrs. whatever, then you start playing, or maybe it is when a specific gesture is done or a specific event happens, right? So that's my piece of advice number one. And piece of advice number two is whatever you pick for the recessional should be significantly more lively than whatever you picked for the processional. Typically, you want to have relatively more solemn or more reverent music for the walk-in time, but for the walk-out time, it's really important to pick something upbeat, something high energy, and there's two reasons for that. First off, it just works really well with the flow of ceremonies that I've done in the past, but also secondly, at the end, people are going to be clapping, cheering, whistling, all sorts of things. And if the music is not loud, we're just not even going to be heard at all. So if you want a real effective piece of music for the end of your ceremony, then you should pick something lively. That's about it. If you have any questions, please get in touch. I will answer your questions for free. I have a link in the video description that you can use to contact me. And if you're watching this from my website, you can also use the contact menu up there or the live music menu here for more information. I work with an incredibly talented network of musicians across different genres and styles in Southern California and beyond. So any questions, I would be more than glad to answer them or point you in the right direction. And if you're looking for music for your upcoming big day, let me know.